Welcome to our 14th lecture for programming mobile devices. In our last lecture, we talked about how to speak over a network, take a URI and get a string in return. In this example, we're just going to connect the dots. We're going to go from our plant search screen to our network DAO. And we're going to make it so that a user can enter plant search information and then receive the results. Honestly, everything in this lesson is pure Java. We did the Android specific logic when we made the UI, and then we used some Apache libraries in the network DAO. So those are the two ends that we're trying to connect together. And honestly now, we're just going to be dealing with strings and parsing out strings and some DTOs or POJOs. Going to be pretty straightforward. Information from this lecture will go on quiz number, you know what, actually let's put it on the exam. Let me think what week we're in. We're in week 3 out of 7. No, let's do it on, I believe we're up to quiz number 7. So we'll put it on quiz question suggestions for quiz 7. Okay, so we know that we want to do a lot of work in this fetch plants by search. And if I'm just going to use what I know I actually have in the plant places search method. So I know I have genus. Let's do species equals yeah, there we go, Cilician fir. Okay, and probably common equals fir. Yep, there we go. So genus, species, and common. This is what my URL is going to look like. It's going to look something like this. plantplaces.com/perl/mobile/viewplants, genus AB, species Cilicica, common equals fir. Where what's between the equals and the ampersand are the parts that can vary. Okay, in other words, these are the parts that I'm going to fill in from that plant search object that I received. So I can leave blank what I don't have. I might say Acer, species, rube, and I can do a partial word like that. Common, we'll just leave common blank. And we'll see that we'll get some red maples in return. So this is what our URL should look like. I'm going to go back now and assemble URI. I'll say string URI equals, okay, and let me put this in quotes. There is a better option if you want to be a bit more object-oriented. For this, I need to go back to the presentation. There's this thing called, let's see, we're in the networking presentation. I'm showing how the URL is going to work. Okay. There's a thing called a URI builder, which is provided to us in the Apache libraries. You can use that if you prefer. Doing it the way I'm doing it is kind of old school, but still works, and that is I'm assembling a URL as a string. So I'm going to take out the genus there, and I'm going to put, notice what I did, I used to have the real genus equals Acer, okay? I'll take out Acer because that's hard coding it, right? And instead I'm going to say plus search plant dot get genus, there we go, plus. So I'm doing a little bit of string concatenation. Species, again, we'll use a little bit of string concatenation, okay, and we'll say search plant dot get species, okay, common equals, and then search plant dot get common name. There we go. Okay. One risk I have to think back to my DAO and how are these guys instantiated, because is it going to fill that with null? You know what I should really do? I should assign those to temporary variables. It'll be a bit more clear, and also I can handle nulls a bit easier. So let me do that. Let me make some temporary string variables. We'll say string genus equals. Here's where it gets a little tricky. I'm going to use what some people call the tertiary operator, some people call it the ternary operator. But what I'll do is say string genus equals search plant dot get genus equal, let's say not equal null, question mark, search plant dot get genus, colon, double quote, semicolon. Holy smokes, what is that? What I'm doing is this is, let's say, a ternary operator, we'll call it. Some people call it a tertiary operator. What we do is we start with a test. Is search plants get genus not null? If so, then we do what comes between the question mark and the colon. Okay? If it's not null, we do what's between the question mark and the colon. If it is null, we do what's after the colon. Okay, one of these two is going to be assigned to this variable genus. Either this or this. That's determined based on what the result of this test is here. If this test returns true, we do this. If it returns false, we do this. Okay, so it's like an if test in one line. I can do the same thing. Species equals, I can do something very similar for species. Search plant.getSpecies, okay. Not equal null, question mark search plant.getSpecies, whoops, get species, colon, boom, boom. Okay, string common name equals search plant.getCommonName, not equal null, question mark search plant.getCommonName, okay, colon, and then double space. Why am I doing this? So that I can make sure I'm not actually passing the word null to a URL. It's either going to pass a populated piece of data or an empty string. Now I can come back in my URL assembly here, and where I have these method calls, I'll put in those temporary variables, genus, and here species, and finally common name. So it's a little pre-validation to make sure I'm not passing the word null. Instead, I'd be passing in an empty string. If I passed in the word null, then the search wouldn't work because it would search for a species called null. Or it might give a null pointer exception. I don't know. Haven't tried this one before by passing in a null. So it's best to do a little bit of cleaning at first to make sure that we don't get a null pointer exception. Okay, pass the assembled URI to the network DAO and receive the response. This is where we go to the friend that we just wrote, the network DAO. So I'm going to say network DAO, and that's my variable I've declared above. Okay, request. And I'm going to pass it that URI that I just assembled. So Eclipse guessed correctly, and there we go. Now we're going to get a red line. And why are we getting this red line? Because network DAO throws a checked exception. And what does that mean? A checked exception means that there is a throws clause here, okay, that says that you have to decide how you would deal with these exceptions. In online plant DAO, what would I do if I were offline? There's nothing much I can do. What I can do is I can throw the exception to the method that called me and have that deal with it. Let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control and press 1 and say add throws declaration. There we go. Okay, I think that covers it. Is there anything else we need? Will just IO exception work? Okay, that should work for us. The problem is now I'm out of sync with the interface, so I need to add this throws IO exception to the plant DAO interface. And there we go. And save. And save. Okay, now we're in good shape. And we're starting to build up. The class that's going to call this is going to be our plant service class. One moment, please. Okay. Sometimes, okay, there we go. Sometimes the screen capture software, I can't see the little box and I'm afraid it stopped recording, but we're good. Okay, now remember, this is going to return a string, and that string is going to represent a response. So what I want to do now in Eclipse is put my cursor on this line, hold down Control, press 1, and then say assign to new local variable. And that string, actually we'll call it response, that's probably a better name. That string is going to represent the entire response. Okay, in other words, if I searched on Acer, this is what I would get. it's going to represent all of this. Okay, so there are two different delimiters we need to worry about. What terminates the line and what separates each field. Those are two things we need to be concerned with. Okay, so iterate over each line of the response. What we can do here is we can take these lines. Okay, let's say response, and we can use the split method. Now remember what the split method will do. The split method will take a regular expression, or if we wish, it will take just a string, which is, by definition, a regular expression. It will split up a string based on this delimiter. The delimiter I'm using is the new line special character, which simply says break to a new line. There's one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. So I'm breaking up this entire response into a set of lines. That's going to return to me a string array, which I want to save in a local variable. So with my cursor on line 32, I hold Control, press 1, and I say assign a new local variable. We'll call this string lines. There we go. Each line, and I'll put this in comments. Actually, let me move this comment down. Okay. Split the response into its respective lines. Each line represents a plant. There we go. Okay. Iterate over each line of the response. Here's where we can do a couple things. Let's see. We'll go ahead and do a for each loop. And this is one place where I like NetBeans. NetBeans has the letter F-O-R-E, the word F-O-R-E, which will do a quick for each loop. Okay, what I'm going to do here is say for, and then string line, colon, lines. What I'm doing is I'm saying iterate over the string array of lines. For each iteration, take the next line and put it in a string variable named line. Each line is going to represent a plant. Then I do an open curly. Naturally, I want to consider what are the steps I want to repeat, because that's going to be the scope of the block of this loop, the lines I want to repeat. I start the loop here, parse the response by the delimiter. Okay, that means parse it by the semicolon. Create a new plant object, add the plant object to the array list of plants, return the array list of all plant objects. Okay. Each of these lines I want to iterate over. Then when I'm finished, I want to do this return. So this is the best place to put that closed curly. Now, in Eclipse, I can Control A and Control I, and that will auto-indent. So you see the comments that I added earlier? By doing that, I've now just indented them, so I can tell that they're definitely within the for. Okay, and I save before I get too carried away. Okay, parse the response by the delimiter. Okay, so I'm going to say line.split. Okay, once again, I can give it a regular expression or a delimiter. In this case, I'm giving it a semicolon because that's the delimiter I've used. So notice this big chunk of data, we split it twice. Once on the new line, which splits it into its individual lines, and now we're splitting again based on the semicolon, which is going to split it into its individual fields. Okay, that of course is going to return a string array, which we'll assign to a new local variable, and I will call this plant data. Okay, now create a new plant object. Okay, plant this plant equals new plant. It's very important that we do this inside the loop, because if we did it outside the loop, we'd only create one plant object. But we actually want a new plant object for each iteration of this loop. Okay, good. Now, fill it with data from the line. Okay, well, we know it's the plant ID, genus, species, cultivar, and then common name. That's the data that we're getting back. So let's see, this plant dot set. Do we have an ID? Well, we don't have a set ID. All right, so we'll skip that one. This plant dot set genus. Okay, and then we'll say plant data 1 because the first element is the genus. This plant dot set species. plant data 2. Okay, this plant dot set cultivar plant data 3. This plant dot set common name plant data 4. I'm doing a couple of risks here. Number one, I'm hard coding this to be exactly what my return is here. If I were ever to modify the server and change the order or the number of fields, that would then break this DAO. So I have to be very careful of that. Secondly, I haven't verified that I actually have 4 array elements. What if I only have 1 array element and I try to access element number 3? I'm going to get an array index out of bounds exception, which is a checked exception. I'm sorry, is an unchecked exception. That means we should avoid it from ever happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add here, make sure we have enough fields returned. If not, we have an invalid object. Okay, if plant data, I thought it was size, length, we'll say greater than 4. That should be good. Yeah, greater than 4. Okay, do this. Okay. And then else, we'll just put a log in here. Log dot info, not enough data returned in this row to create a plant. Check source data plant, and then we'll say plus line. Okay, Control Shift O, organize imports. I really didn't want to import an Android package here. You know what? I'm going to cancel this. We will just skip not enough data. There are a couple ways we could do that, but I really want to keep this DAO clean of Android packages, so we'll just skip that. Don't worry about that right now. Truth is, we should be getting back valid data. I'm going to save, Control A, Control I, which remember will auto indent. Okay, and now add this plant object to the array list of all plant objects. Okay, well, I don't have an array list of all plant objects, but that's what I need to return. So it looks like I need to make one, and then we should be pretty close to finished. So, up at the top of the method, I'll say create a collection to hold the returned plants. Okay, and I'll say array list plant, all plants equals new array list plant. Okay, open and close paren and semicolon. And then we'll say return all plants at the bottom. And now add the plant object to the array list of all plants dot add, and this plant. There we go. Okay, so let's review. We're starting with a new empty collection of plants. Okay, we're doing a search. Okay, we're performing that search online. We are getting back several lines. Each line represents a plant, and each line ends with a /n. We iterate over those lines. For each line, we split on the semicolon, which splits the line into its individual fields. We parse out that array and populate a plant object. We add that plant object to the collection of plant objects. So in theory, if we have 5 plants, our array will have 5 plants in it. And then we return those 5 plants. And I hit save. Okay, we're looking pretty good. At this point, our online plant DAO is complete. And all we need to do is we need to wire it up in a plant service. So I'm going to come back to the Package Explorer. And remember, we have a stub. Here's the place where we're taking out the stub and we're putting in the actual implementation. So I right-click on the service and I say new class, and I say plant service. And for interfaces implemented, I'll choose add iPlant service and finish. Now it gives me the fetch all genus and fetch all categories. I really should make that live as well, but for the moment, I know this is dirty. I'm going to copy what we have in the stub. Okay? Let's see, it was fetch all genus and fetch all categories. Right now, the only one I'm going to make live is fetch plant. There are other ways to do it, but, and I know this is a little bit dirty because I really should actually have these being live now, but needless to say, let me go ahead and do that so that we can move on and take care of our fetch plant method. I choose save. Okay, this plant service, as I said, we're concerned right now with this method here. This plant service is going to need access to our online plant DAO. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable of type iPlantDAO. Okay, iPlantDAO, plant DAO. And we know we'll typically initialize that in a constructor. First, I'll Control-Shift-O to organize imports. So now I'll say public plant service. Okay. Actually, I'm going to make two of these. Online plant DAO and iPlant DAO offline plant DAO. Okay. I'll say online plant DAO equals new online plant DAO. Okay. Control-Shift-O, organize imports, and there we go. Now, what I'm going to do is in the fetch plant method, I'm going to say, okay, find matching plants. Okay. And we'll say return, let's say, well, let's do it this way, online plant DAO dot fetch plants by plant search, plant, boom, there we go. Okay, control I, assign to new local variable. Okay, and what does this not like? Probably no return statement. Okay, we need to return fetch plants by search. Okay, now what we should really do here, I'm going to save. What we should really do here is see what happens if I take away this throws exception. If I take away the throws exception, I now have to, one moment please. Oop, daggone it, sorry. I'm trying to get focus back on Screencast-O-Matic. So sometimes the little control panel for Screencast-O-Matic goes away and I can't tell if it's recording. Okay. Here is the right place to deal with this exception. I'm going to put a try-catch around this, okay? And what I want to do here is say, we are here because there is a network exception. Okay, switch to offline mode. The problem is we don't have offline support yet, so I'll put to do create offline support. In the meantime, I will just go ahead and rethrow this. I will say, meanwhile, rethrow exception. Okay, throw E. Okay, we're going to want to come back and support an offline mode where we don't have to go to a network. When we do, we will replace this catch block with a simple toggle over to the offline plant DAO. In the real live plant places, that's how it actually works. So if, let me see if I can go to plant places in the plant service DAO. Plant service, one moment. Here we go. So this is the real live plant service, and see, here's literally what happens. Try the online. If we catch an exception, try the offline. So that's what we eventually want to do when we will have some offline plant support. But right now we don't have that yet because we haven't talked about the SQLite database yet. When we talk about the SQLite database, we'll come back here and fill in that blank. Okay, so I'll also add back throws exception I'll also add back that throws exception, and then we're all good. Okay, and I save. Now only one thing left to do, and we're just about finished. I'm going to go to my activity screen for plant results, and we see that um, here we get our plant search, and we're running it through the plant service. Now what is the plant service? Okay, we're calling the fetch plant method. Remember, that's the one I just defined here, fetch plant, in my non-stub, in my actual implementation. Okay, so here's what's cool. Now that I have a completed actual plant service, not just the stub, but the plant service, here's all I need to change in the UI to wire it up. I simply change the constructor call here to plant service, Control-Shift-O to organize imports. We're all done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a breakpoint. I'm going to save and set a breakpoint so that we can walk through this step by step and watch it happen. Just to make sure that I don't accidentally overstep the breakpoint, go ahead and add a break. Oh, come on. Don't get mad at me. There we go. I'll add some breakpoints throughout everything that we've been doing today so that we can watch each part step by step. Online plant DAO, set a breakpoint here, and network DAO, set a breakpoint here, and we should be all set to go. Okay, I do have the Android debugger up, but you know what? I'm going to stop and restart it just because I made so many changes. So I'm going to stop, and restart takes a few moments, so I'm going to pause the recording and then play again once it's back. Okay, the debugger's up, and let's see, I want to choose, I'm on the location finder screen, so I'm going to choose find specimen. And the debugger shouldn't hit until, or we shouldn't hit a breakpoint unless I have others set. We probably won't hit a breakpoint until we actually search for a plant. Also keep in mind, I haven't actually run this through. We're looking at this both at the same time. So there's a fair chance that we might find an error and we'll have to go back and fix it, no problem. A breakpoint has hit, it's probably one I set earlier. So yes, switch to debug perspective. Okay. Yeah, this is one I had set earlier. I'll go ahead and turn this off. I'll disable this. As a matter of fact, I will disable any other breakpoints that we have set. Yeah, like the ones we did with the menu before. Go ahead and disable that and play. Okay. Disable and play. Disable and play. Okay. Now, with any luck, here we go. Yep. I'm going to search for genus Aves because we know we had about 5 results for that. That seems like a fair amount to go through. Okay. I select on Aves. Now I'm going to hit search. Now this is where it hands off from the search screen over to the results screen, and this is where I'm expecting that the debugger is going to pick up. So I hit search and cross our fingers. Let's see what happens. Okay, we start in search plants. Okay, actually this one we saw earlier. I'll go ahead and disable this and play. Okay, and again I'm going to disable breakpoints from our last lesson and play through them. And here we go. Okay, first of all, the first big question is, remember, I switched this plant service from using the stub to using the actual implementation a little bit earlier. Now what I want to see is, are we actually using the real implementation? I choose F5 to step into, and let's see what we go to. Sure enough, we're in the real plant service here, not the stub, because notice that plant service lit up. Okay, now what we're doing is we're going to the online plant DAO and fetching the plant by this plant that was populated from our search criteria. And we see in the debugger window, it has Aves. So there we go. There's the Aves that we entered earlier. I choose F5 to step in. Okay. Fetch plant by plant search. Here we go. We're going to go through this part slowly. Okay, we first create our return. Now, genus. This should have the word Aves in it, if I did my math right. And sure enough, I go to the variables and we see genus Aves. The other one should just have empty string because I didn't put in a species or a common name. So species and common name. And sure enough, when I look in the variables view, let me see if I can get this on one screen so I don't have to keep moving around. There we go, it looks a lot better. We see species is empty string, common name is empty string, genus is abies. Once again, if I were playing the part of, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just go ahead and let the URI run. Let me do the URI here, F6. Let's take a look at that URI. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it into our browser, and we're going to see now what we think Android's going to see in a moment. Okay, Android, this is the string it's going to get in return. This is the string it's going to get in return. So here's the big question. What happens here? This is where I get a little bit concerned because we have a lot of risk here. We actually have to go over the network. I am at home now, and if all works well, we'll be able to make a network connection. And I also hope I put everything together properly. Note the URI that we're sending. I'm going to choose F5, and this will take us into our network URI. Here's where I get a little bit nervous. So, okay, we get our client, we get our get method, okay, we get our response handler. There will be a delay, even if it works, there will be a delay because the Android debugger is literally going online and fetching this data. So F6 and hold your breath. If 31 lights up green, which it just did, we're in great shape, and it did. Okay, I go back and let's look at my return string, and here we go. Does this look familiar? This is in Eclipse. But it's exactly what we were just looking at in our browser. It returned all the plants in plantplaces.com that have a genus of type abies. So actually right now I'm pretty happy. Okay, I F6 back. I get my big response and I split it into its individual lines. Let's take a look in the debugger and see what these lines look like. I expand the lines. There we go. One line for each plant. 7 plants total. Wonderful. So now we're going, because we have 7 lines total, 7 plants, we're going to iterate over this 7 times. Let's look at the first one. F6. We're going to take our very first line, okay, and let's see if I can pull this up. There's our first line, and we're going to split this by the semicolon. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, plant ID is position 0. We're not using that. Genus, position 1. Species, position 2. Common or cultivar, position 3. Common name, position 4. Those are the ones that we're using. So now we're going to split that on the semicolon. Choose F6. Okay, let's take a look at plant data in the debugger. I'm sorry, with such a small screen I have to keep moving. But there we go. Plant data, ID, genus, species, cultivar, common name. Perfect. And now we're making plants out of it. Okay, make a new plant object. Set its genus. Let me see if I can expand down here and we'll watch this plant get populated. Genus is abies. Set the species. Okay, alba. Set the cultivar. Contorta. Set the common name. Corkscrew silver fir. Add this to the collection of plants. So see, we've just gone from a big string of data to one plant DTO. And when we have this DTO, we can feed it back to our screen in Android. F6, let's go through the next one. Okay, the next one is Abies silicica, Cilician fir. Okay, populating the genus and the species, the cultivar, the common name, added to the collection. Okay, and we go through the next. I'll go in a bit of a fast forward now as we continue to iterate over these plants. And then we'll see after about 7 iterations of this loop, we will finally have an array list with 7 plants. So I'll continue iterating over. If we get tired with this, what we can do is we can either set up a debugger breakpoint that is run to line, or we can simply press F7, which means finish running this method without the debugger, and then return to the calling method, and then pick the debugger back up there. That's a pretty nice one. Okay. So AB's Nordmania, Nordman fur, kind of lost count now. Oh, there we go, perfect. Okay, so fetch plants by search. We just did our online lookup. Now let's take a look. Fetch plants by search. We should have about 7 items in there, and we do. Was it 8 total? Okay. All right, cool. Okay, I didn't realize we had 8 total. So 8 items. Now we're going to return this, and I choose F6. It's going to return this back to our plant results activity. And remember activity, that means we're on a UI screen. So it's going to take this, make that visible to the user. At this point, I'm going to press play, and let's see what we have in Android. And there we go. Live plant results, right from plant places. Now I'm going to disconnect the debugger, but I'm going to keep the emulator running so that I can go back and just make sure that the search works as we wish. I hit the back button. Oh, shoot. Okay, well, you know, sometimes it doesn't always work as you want. I think I confused it there. Let's see, Plant Places Mobile. Hopefully I can find the one that we're actually working on. I have a few different versions here, and I'm not sure which one is... not that one. That's not what I want. Okay. Let's try this. Is this the one? Their icons are all the same. So yes, this is it. Okay, I'm going to hit this, but without the debugger. This time, let's do Acer. There we go. And then I'm going to do Rubrum, just RUB, which is red maple. And again, this is live hooked up to Plant Places right now. So what we're going to see, if I hit search, is that, oh shoot, looks like that rubrum went away, is that I get acers, okay? Let me try again, RUB, okay, and search. Now I should only get red maple. There we go, okay? Let's try something entirely different we haven't tried before. Let's see, let's do a Quercus. And let's also do RUB, which is a red oak. When I do search, there we go, Quercus rubra. So we see we're dealing with live data, and if I even do Quercus, which is oak, there are lots of oaks in Plant Places. So we can even deal with a lot of data. And we see because we have this list like this, okay, we can scroll up and down and see all the different oaks. And it should match pretty closely to live Plant Places, both if I were to say genus equals Quercus, like this, or if I were actually to go to plantplaces.com, okay, and just search on Quercus, and see the actual live results, and there we go. So let's go back to our Scrum board and see how we did. Okay, there we go. Our goal in these 2 lessons was to create working implementations. And we know there's a little more we want to do on things like getting unique genus. But at this point, we can enter data, and we can see it live, go to a website and fetch data. Okay, we know there's a lot of power in that. Like I talked about the example with the phenological calendar. Also things like web services. This is huge. If you combine some of the information available on the internet with the hardware that's specific to your phone, like the camera, the GPS device, it becomes huge. Lots and lots of potential there. Lots of great ideas. So I'm going to now drag this to done. Okay, I guess we can just drop them right there. That'll work. Next thing we'll look at is more than likely GPS in our next presentation. So we'll look at GPS. After that, we'll see how we're doing this quarter. To be honest, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and that's kind of intentional because in case something happened with my schedule, with me traveling so much, I wanted to make sure to be a little ahead on presentation so that if I was unable to make a presentation one week, we wouldn't lose any ground. So we'll see how we're doing. We'll talk about GPS next, and probably after that we'll look at the camera and also threading, and that should wrap us up for this quarter. So remember everything we covered today. Remember how we went from our stub to our actual implementation. Remember the network DAO and how it takes a URI and it assembles with an HTTP client, HTTP GET, and response handler. It's able to create a response and send that over the network. And honestly, everything in the middle was just plain Java. Our online plant DAO, we know it. I mean, this is, if we look at the imports here, they're all, except for one Apache import, they're all just plain Java imports. So we're doing what we did in Computer Programming 1, which is take a string and split it up. Use a few loops and if tests and split it up. All of these will make great quiz question suggestions. Also remember the ternary or tertiary operator. This is a good quiz question suggestion, where we have a test, okay? And then we have the true part. Let me squeeze this over a little bit. Then we have the true part, and then the false part. So what gets returned if it's true, what gets returned if it's false. I don't like to use this much, but this is one case if I just want to say, give me the value or something else if it's null. That is a case when I'll use this. So these questions are great for quiz question suggestions number 7. And we'll see you in a little bit for GPS. Thank you very much.